Okay, looks like we're up and running here. Give it a second just to make sure. If you can hear me or see me, make a comment in the live chat to the right. Just say hello so I know that you're here, so that I know we're all together and we're all ready to go. I think we're good to go. I think we're live, just to make sure. Make sure everybody's here, everybody can talk, everybody can see each other. Okay. Looks like we're good. Okay. So, I'm just gonna start, and as everybody starts funneling on, uh, we can just keep going. And when you're here, just say hello, say hi, so I know you're here. Tonight, I'm glad that again I can talk to you and we can still meet, even though it's over the internet. I'll take it. I'm glad that we have some sort of way of communicating with each other and connecting with each other, even though we're not here in person. But tonight is going to be a great night because we're in the fourth and final part of our Wise Choices series. We're in the last part of it, the last final week of this series that we've been going through on wise choices. And we've been focusing on this question of how do we get from here to there? How do we get from where we are now, the place we are at as junior high schoolers? How do we get from where we are now to where we want to be in the future? How do we do that? And in the first week, we talked about what wisdom was, and we talked about how we start pursuing that. And in the second week, we talked about the difference between just having knowledge and having wisdom, right? Having knowledge by itself isn't enough. You have to add wisdom to it. So we talked about that in week 2. And in the third week, we talked about um, the difference between experience and wisdom, right? We talked about the fact that just having experience by itself isn't enough either. You have to have wisdom with it. Otherwise, experience by itself really isn't a great teacher, right? Because you can have all the experiences in the world, but if you don't learn from it, it really means nothing. So if you missed a week, I don't want to encourage you to go to our YouTube page and just check it out, and it'll be worth your time, I promise you. So if you've missed any of those weeks, I encourage you to check them out. But tonight, we're going to talk about the reality that when we're thinking about getting from where we are now to where we want to be, we look at these people around us and we see them, and they've already had their moment, right? There are these people that we can look around at and we can see that they've had that moment. They've had these moments that we might call defining moments, right? Moments where they finally made it, and moments that made them, right? Moments that made them famous, that made it so that people knew their names, that people knew who they were. And if you're anything like me, you might find yourself asking this question. All of these people had their moment. Where is my moment? When am I going to get mine? We look at all these people like Tom Holland. We talked about him last week. Tom Holland, before he was Spider-Man, nobody knew who he was, right? Nobody knew who Tom Holland was because uh, that's just how it was. But then he got cast as Spider-Man, and now everybody knows him, and he's been cast for multiple other different movies, and he's a pretty famous guy now. Everybody knows who he is. And another example of this is like Justin Bieber, right? Before he was famous, he was just putting YouTube videos of himself singing up on the internet until one day an agent just happened to be looking out through YouTube and found his video, and now he's one of the most recognized and popular singers of his generation. Or maybe we could think of Taylor Swift, right? When she made the transition from country to pop, that was a defining moment for her in her career. Another example is the Paul brothers, right? Jake and Logan Paul. They blew up when Vine blew up, right? The app. They blew up when Vine kind of showed up on the scene, but before that, they were literally nobody. Nobody knew who they were, right? They weren't famous in any way, shape, or form. Now almost everybody knows their name. They had these defining moments, moments where they made it, and moments that made them. And sometimes, if you're like me, I find myself asking the question, when am I going to get my moment? Right? And maybe you ask that same question too. And so, when I was in high school, I think about myself, and the moment that I was looking for, the moment that I wanted was when I finally became a real man, right? The kind that girls would like, right? That's what my focus was. I couldn't wait for my moment when I was a man. And so I really wanted to grow really big muscles. I wanted facial hair, and I really wanted that. And the reason was because I had two friends, okay? One friend, he was super muscular and had a deep voice, and the other friend, he had a full-on beard as a freshman, right? This wasn't like our senior year. As freshmen in high school, they had literally everything that I wanted. And so there's just another level of confidence that you have that you walk around with as a high schooler. If you have a beard, you just feel super confident in yourself because you feel like a real man. And I remember there was a team that we played against in sports and in football and basketball, and this guy was like 6'4", so really tall. He was like 220 pounds, and he was ripped. He was this big, muscular guy, and he had a full-on beard. And so I looked at that guy and I was like, literally, he has no idea how lucky he is. I bet he gets all the girls he wants. I bet he starts in every sport he plays. I wish I had what he had, right? And when you're in high school and you play against someone who looks like that, you don't want to mess with him, right? You don't want to guard him in basketball. You don't want to be hit by him in football. And so he had basically everything that I wanted at that time. So all my friends, they were getting bigger, they were getting stronger, and it was just natural too. They weren't even working out. They were just lucky enough to get there. And me, I was working out every single day. I was eating as much food as I could, and all I was this short little, barely 100 pounds kid in high school. I was short, weak, and awkward, right? A trifecta of awesomeness, let me tell you. I was so thankful for it. Not. It was awful. And so I was waiting for my moment. And to make matters worse, my mom, bless her heart, she had pure intentions, right? She wanted to encourage me. But this is what she said. She said, Isaac, you're just a late bloomer. Thanks, mom. That makes me feel a lot better about the situation. And I was like, you know what? Maybe she's right. Maybe I'll finally get bigger and stronger. Maybe I'll grow my facial hair. But what ended up happening is I got taller, but not any wider. So it was even worse. I was just tall and skinny and weak and awkward. And so my mom, instead of saying, you're just a late bloomer, she transitioned to saying, oh, you're not skinny. You look great, which was not true. I think thanks for loving me so blindly, mom. I appreciate it, but it was not helpful. And so what's crazy was I stayed skinny for a long time, no matter how hard I tried. And even today, it's something that really affects me. Like it's something that I'm self-conscious about, right? If someone goes up and they grab my arm, it just makes me nervous that they're gonna be like, oh, he's so skinny, because that's something that really affected me when I was in high school, and I was waiting for that moment. I wanted to be a man. All these other people, they were big, they were strong, they had beards, they had their moment. Where's mine? Come on, God, I want that moment. That's what I would think. And I think on some level, we can all relate to that, right? I think there's these moments, these defining moments that we look around and we see that all these other people had their moment, and we're waiting for ours to finally show up. We're waiting for ourselves to have that moment. The moment where people finally notice us, right? Maybe when we get TikTok famous, or when we make the starting team of whatever sport we try out for, or that moment where that girl finally says yes, right? That moment where we know it's going to make us into something great and we're finally going to have what we're looking for. Those defining moments, we want those for ourselves. And here's the problem though. All of those people that we talked about, all those people who had their moments and now they're famous, it didn't happen in a single standalone moment, right? Everybody's defining moment was a moment built on another, on another, on another, until finally the one moment showed up that changed everything for them. And here's the problem. So many of us, we sit around and we're waiting for that moment to show up, and then we start comparing ourselves to other people. We look at the other people in our lives and we think, well, they have what I want, and I don't have it yet, so there must be something wrong with me. Because insecurity, it starts to kick in, and we think, maybe I'm not good enough. And that's why my moment hasn't shown up yet. No matter how hard I try, I'll never be good enough. And that's why I don't have what I'm looking for, because I'm just not good enough. That's why I haven't made the transition from here to there. Right? And it leads to a sense of frustration. I mean, I'm working like crazy and I'm trying all I can. I'm working really hard, but my moment still hasn't shown up. Eventually, that frustration, it turns into bitterness, and then we get critical nature, and we start tearing other people down to make ourselves feel better. And it can just turn into a sense of apathy because, I've tried so hard over and over and again, and I still don't have what I want. It never works. So why should I try? It doesn't even matter. So we just sit around and we wait for that moment to show up. But the problem is that we can never control when that moment will show up. All we can do is make the most of this moment right now. We can never control when the moment will show up. All we can do is make the most of this moment that we're in right here every single day. All we can do is make the most of the time that we have now. And here's what's beautiful is that wisdom makes the most of every single moment. And it's because it sees every single moment as a defining moment in our lives. Because every moment demonstrates who you are today and defines who you're going to become tomorrow. And here's what we learned so far. We learned that life, the life we want tomorrow, is built on the choices we make today. And if we want to make it to where we want to be someday, if we want to have that defining moment, then we have to have the wisdom to make the most of this moment right here. We can never control when that moment will come. We have to make the most of this moment right here and right now. All we can do is make the most of this moment. We have to see every single moment as a defining moment because every moment demonstrates who you are today and defines who you will become tomorrow. So, how do we get from here to there? How do we do that? Well, we have to make the most of every single moment. So, to further illustrate this, I want to tell you a story about a guy named Matthew, right? And what you need to know about Matthew is that he lived 2,000 years ago. He was one of the authors of one of the most famous books in history, right? The most famous book in history. He was one of the earliest parts of the most influential movement the world has ever seen. And this guy, he had so much influence that there are literally people that you probably know. You probably have friends or you know of someone who was named after him, right? That's Matthew, and that's who we're talking about tonight. He was kind of a big deal, but he didn't start out that way. He was one of Jesus's early followers, and he wrote a portion of the Bible, a portion of the New Testament that we call the Gospel according to Matthew. Okay? And what I love is that when we're looking at his story, what we're going to see is a defining moment for Matthew. We're going to see a moment where he encounters Jesus, and that's the moment that changes everything for him. But as we look at this story, what we're going to see is that the moment wasn't just a single standalone moment. It was the result of so many other moments that led up to it. And that was a moment that demonstrated that who he was now and what he would become in the future, right? And that's what we're going to look at tonight in this passage. So let's take a look at the gospel according to Matthew. We're going to start in chapter 9, verse 9, and we're going to read from there. And here's what we're told. It says this, Matthew 9:9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office. So first, I'm just going to stop here real quick because there's something really important to note. Matthew, he was sitting in a tax collector's booth. And here's the deal. He didn't just randomly show up there. That was his job. Matthew was a tax collector. And what's important to know about tax collectors in that day is that nobody liked them. They were not popular because tax collectors were considered scum. Because the way that they made their profit was by ripping off the people that they were collecting taxes from. And so people who were tax collectors often were despised by their friends and their family and their neighbors because they made their money ripping off their friends, their family, and their neighbors. So there was a lot of moments that led up to Matthew choosing the career as a tax collector. And there were a lot of moments that led up to Matthew sitting there in the tax collector's booth where we read in the scripture. And here's what we're told. As he went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." So we just have to stop because this is insane. Jesus says to him, "Follow me. Follow me and be my disciple." This is a defining moment for Matthew, right? And what's interesting is that he actually gets up and follows Jesus, which is a big deal. This guy had a career, right? He was making a good amount of money. He was rich. He was wealthy. He had a lot going for him. He made a good living, but nobody liked him. And so this guy, Jesus, he walks up to him, and he's only heard stories about Jesus. He'd never actually met him in person. And Jesus just walks up to him and says, "Hey, come follow me and be my disciple." And the thing is, he does this with no evidence that Jesus is going to make his life better, right? Matthew follows Jesus, but he has no idea, right? He doesn't know that following Jesus is going to make him a better person. He doesn't know that following Jesus is going to take him to a better place in life, but he just follows Jesus. Like he doesn't know any of that stuff yet because the story hadn't been written, right? He couldn't read the book of Matthew because he's the one who wrote it. That hadn't happened in his life. But as we're looking at this, here's what Matthew did. He got up and he followed him. Why? Why did he follow Jesus? Because anything was better than being a tax collector. Anything was better than being hated by so many people in that moment, right? And so uh, what ends up happening is um, Matthew follows him, and then later he invites Jesus and the other disciples who were already following Jesus to his house to have a dinner with him. And he puts this dinner on for all these people with a lot of different guests, like tax collectors and other people who might have been viewed as sinners, people who didn't really follow God. So Jesus goes to Matthew's house, and he's there with a bunch of other sinners and people who you at that time you just didn't want to hang out with. You didn't want to be associated with them. Those are the people that were hanging out there. So then the Pharisees, they're walking by and they see this. They see what's going on. And the Pharisees, they're the religious leaders of the day. And they ask Jesus' disciples, they say, hey, why does your teacher eat with such scum? Why does your teacher eat with these people? These are not good people. Why is he doing this? And when they're asking this question, they're talking about Matthew. They're talking about Matthew's friends. Matthew, a guy who got up and left his career to follow Jesus, is now being called scum at his own house, at this party that he's throwing to help other people see who Jesus is. And this is a defining moment for Matthew, because in this moment, Matthew's going to find out Jesus really is who people said he was. He's going to see if Jesus was that guy that everybody told him that he was. Are the stories true? And how Jesus responds to this accusation, calling these people scum, is going to change everything for Matthew. And so here's what Jesus says. He says, it is not those who are well who need a doctor, but those who are sick. And then Jesus goes on to say in verse 13, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I didn't come to call the righteous, or those who would call themselves righteous like the Pharisees did, but I came to call sinners. That's Matthew 9:12 through 13. I didn't come to call those who think that they're righteous. I came to call those who know that they're sinners and they need help. I haven't come I haven't come for those people who have it all together. I've come for the broken, scummy people just like Matthew and the people that he invited to that party. And this was a defining moment for Matthew, because Matthew is seeing that Jesus is who other people told him he was. Matthew is seeing that Jesus is the guy who he wanted him to be, a person who sees him for who he was, not as scum like everybody else called him. That he's somebody that Jesus sees him as somebody who's worth loving, and he's somebody worth knowing, that he's somebody worth investing in, and he's someone worth inviting to be a part of Jesus's movement. So Matthew, he's sitting here with Jesus, and he sees Jesus say, here's the deal. I didn't come for self-proclaimed saints. I came for self-aware sinners. I came for people like Matthew. He came for people like me, and he came for people like you. People who are hurting, who are lost, who are simply looking for hope. And this is a defining moment for Matthew. What's interesting is after this moment, Jesus has so many more of these incredible moments that Matthew writes down in his gospel according to Matthew. And we know about this moment because it had such an impact on Matthew's life that he said, I need to write this down because there are so many people. There's so many people 2,000 years later who will need to hear this story, that Jesus comes for people just like me and just like you. He's not coming for those people who have it all together. He's not coming for the people who think that they're perfect. He's coming for those people who are broken and searching for hope. I'm going to write this story down because this is a defining moment for me. So that's what I love about Jesus, is every time you have an interaction with him, it's a defining moment in your life. It demonstrates who you are today and defines who you're going to be in the future, who you're going to become tomorrow. Wisdom. It makes the most of every single moment. And we see Matthew having the wisdom in one moment after another to make the most of that moment, to make the choice that led to the life that he wanted, to lead to the life of significance, of purpose, and of meaning that he'd been searching for literally his whole entire life. But he could never find it until that moment, the moment that Jesus showed up. So, how do you get from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow, in the future? How do you get from here to there? How do you go from who you are now to who you want to be, to who Jesus is calling you to be? As you look around, you see all of these people who have these defining moments, and you're waiting for your moment to show up. What do you do then? You have the wisdom to make the most of every moment, because this moment right now, in the middle of a pandemic, is your moment. This moment right now is a defining moment for you. This moment right here will shape who you become tomorrow. The moment that you interact with your brother or sister, and instead of getting mad at them or saying hurtful things to them, and you choose instead to love them and say nice things or treat them well, that's a defining moment. That's a moment that changes you from who you are now to who God's calling you to be in the future. How do you make the most of every moment? How do you do that? Well, how do you have wisdom to make this moment count? All right, so here's how to find out. Right, I'm not going to just ask you that question and then leave, but here are three things that'll help you make the most of every single moment. Three things. The first is you have to stop, then you got to drop, and you got to roll. Okay? Stop, drop, and roll. Sound good? Okay, cool. I'll see you guys later. This is a good youth group. We're done. No, I'm just kidding. So I'll explain. So, first you have to stop. You have to stop what you're doing. You have to pause and simply take a breath. And this is really hard to do in the moment. Like you're having an argument with somebody or you're on the internet and you see a post and you want to comment on it, just stop and take a breath. Then you drop whatever's going on, literally or figuratively, depending on what the context is or where you're at. You drop to your knees and you ask God, God, help me to have the wisdom to make the most of this decision, to make the most of this moment. Right? If you pray and you ask God for him to give you the wisdom to make the most of this moment, then he absolutely will give it to you. So first you stop, you take a deep breath, then you drop and you pray and you ask God to help you make the most of this moment, and then you finally roll. And now this one, you don't have to like roll on the ground, but if that would help you, you can certainly do it. But what you do is you roll on through. You just keep on going with your life. You roll on with the rest of your day, doing the best you can to make the most of every single moment because you know that wisdom makes the most of every single moment because every moment is a defining moment in your life. It demonstrates who you are today and it defines who you will become tomorrow. And what we know is that in order to get the life we want tomorrow, we have to make wise choices today. So, when I think about defining moments, I think about a defining moment in history. It was the moment that changed literally everything. It changed the whole entire world. The moment when Jesus didn't stay dead. The moment when the tomb was empty. Everybody thought that the Jesus movement was over. They thought he was the Messiah. And then they saw him die on the cross and they thought it was done. But Jesus didn't stay dead. They saw the empty tomb. The moment when Jesus proved that he was who he said he was. Because he was the first and only person to predict his own death and resurrection. And then he pulled it off. He actually did it. If you don't believe that's a defining moment, then just look at your calendar, right? The year right now is 2020. Why is that the year? It's because 2020 years ago, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came to this earth, lived a perfect life, died a sinless death, and on the third day was raised from the dead. If he didn't come back from the dead, if Jesus hadn't been resurrected, we wouldn't be talking about him thousands of years later. We wouldn't have remembered him because there would have been no point. That moment defines how we tell time, and it's the moment that shaped thousands, millions, even billions of people around the world because Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection was a defining moment in history. And that's the moment that shows us who we really are. It shows us our value because Jesus was willing to die for us. But Jesus' death and resurrection wasn't a standalone moment. That didn't happen until the end of Jesus' life at the age of like 33. So there were 33 years worth of moments leading up to that moment. And this is what I love about Jesus is over and over and over and over again, for 33 years, Jesus had the wisdom to make the most of every single moment. Knowing that every moment was a defining moment, demonstrating who he was and then defining who he would become and what he would do. It was all leading to that moment when Jesus conquered death, when Jesus changed history, when Jesus changed you, and when Jesus changed me. So, how do we get from here to there? We have to first recognize that the life we want tomorrow is built on the choices that we make today. We have to recognize that the defining moment that we're waiting for, we can't control when that finally shows up. We can't control when that's actually going to happen for us. All we can do is make the most of this moment right now, which is actually a lot harder than it sounds. right? It sounds nice to say that we're just going to make the most of every single moment, but honestly, we waste so many of them, right? How many times have you like known that you should probably read your Bible, but instead you like played a video game or something? If you've ever done something like that, you knew you should have taken advantage of the moment, but instead you did something else. I want you to say, that's me, right? If you've ever known that you should make the most of the moment, but instead you decided to do something else, right? I want you to say, that's me in the comments, because we know that we should make the most of every moment. We know that it's a gift that God gave us to be alive and living right now, but we don't always take advantage of it. I want to encourage you as you move on through the weeks, as you move on through quarantine and figuring out all this stuff, that you can make the most of every moment. That doesn't have to be your life. You don't have to be the person who wastes your time. You can be someone who makes the most of every single moment, because every single moment is a defining moment. So, make the most of every single moment, because moment, this is your moment. Let's pray. Lord, you're so good to us. And we thank you for the fact that you were willing to die on our behalf. Lord, you didn't sin. You didn't do anything wrong. You were sinless. You were spotless. You were clean. But Lord, you decided that you were going to die for our sake. Because you loved us so much, you wanted us to be joined to you, joined with you forever in heaven, and you want to spend eternity with us. And we thank you for that gift. I pray that for those of us who maybe haven't fully jumped in and accepted that, I pray that you would speak to our hearts so that we could fully jump into a relationship with you. God, you're so good, and we love you, and we know that during this time of quarantine, it can be pretty uh, depressing and boring, and maybe a little just frustrating. I pray that you would encourage us that you're more powerful than a pandemic. You're more powerful than COVID-19. God, you're more powerful than anything. You're above everything, and I pray that our lives would reflect that. God, you're good. We love you. We pray this in your name. Amen. Well, hey guys, I just want to let you know that tonight actually is the last week that we're meeting for youth group, for like during the school year, but we're still going to have Bible studies throughout the year and throughout the summer. We're going to figure out what that looks like as we move forward. We're going to see what these restrictions are and all this kind of stuff. We're going to see what changes in the future. But tonight is the last official youth group for the school year, but we're still going to go into summer, and we're going to figure out different events, different Bible study things that we can do together, so we can still hang out and still be together with one another. So I just want to let you know that next week we are not meeting on Facebook or on YouTube live. We'll be figuring stuff out for summer. So just be looking out for that text. Make sure you keep bugging your parents and telling them to just ask them every single day. That's what I just want to, I'm going to challenge you to do that. Ask your parents every single day, hey, has Isaac messaged you yet? Messaged you yet what we're going to do in the summer? And if I haven't, say, okay. And then the next day, ask them again. So I just want to let you guys know about that. If you have any questions about maybe anything that we talked about tonight, you can feel free to either message it on here, or you can text me. You can ask your parents and they can text me or whatever. But I just want to thank you guys for joining me again tonight. And I want to encourage you guys to make the most of every single moment. See you later, guys.